my dear children, namaste and welcome to your second chapter of biology for class 10 CBSE. So, right here I am, your biology master teacher Ambika, and let us get started. We are getting started with the chapter How Do Organisms Reproduce, after having completed the chapter Life Processes well in detail, right? Okay, so let us move ahead without wasting any time, but as always, not directly jumping into the concepts, I have a few very useful things to tell you. And what could the first thing be? As always, yes, it is a positive quote. Self-belief and hard work will always earn you success. Okay, so with this in mind, let us get started. Let us move ahead. Some of you may have heard this saying, but for some of you, sometimes you end up feeling, I mean, it's quite natural. This happens with both children and adults alike, that you just end up feeling that you're working very hard, you're working too hard, but then somewhere down the line, we end up losing our self-belief. But then no matter what, if we have been able to reach this point in life, definitely we are going to be achieving more and more in future with self-belief and hard work combined together. Okay, so now coming to the problems which most of our children face, and they've been telling us about this for quite some time now, for the last few months, especially since we know that the COVID pandemic in 2020 has changed everything, right? Has totally and completely changed what is normal to us. But then I think the positive thing that I can feel right now is that we are perhaps like mentally adapted to it now, and that's also part of human nature. But then as part of the student community, we understand that there are quite a number of major problems that you children would be facing, of which these are the major ones. You may have a lot of unanswered doubts because there is no physical teacher in front of you always, and perhaps you don't have access to proper notes, tests and assignments, competitive exam preparation, choice of schedule, choice of language, and so on. But then, in case these are problems that you face, not to worry, here is an end to it, because right here you are at the absolute right place. We have got all these problems solved for you, along with a lot of bonuses, including unlimited live classes, all micro and crash courses, performance reports, and personalized attention, and a lot more. But these are some of the additional bonuses. So what you have to know, or what you have to do to know more about this, you have to just visit this link, vdnt.in/ytpro, and all the details will come to you. But then let's keep it transparent and let me guide you through it very quickly. So it'll, once you visit that link, you will be led through a set of steps. You will be asked to choose your grade. So for you guys, it's going to be grade 10, I suppose, and then select your target, which means you have to select your board and the year. For you guys, it's going to be CBSE 2021, and then you can check out the details, the features that I have mentioned, plus a lot more have been mentioned here. And we call this Vedantu Pro. Okay, and then what do? We have got a lot of offers happening right now, so you go ahead and click the button get subscription. And now comes the big question about pricing. So here I have mentioned the details of the 1 month pro subscription, 3 months pro subscription, and 6 months pro subscription for you. So for a 1 month subscription, what's basically happening is you get unlimited access to all of these features and those that I have told you for 1 full month. The amount payable normally is 2,699, but then application of the coupon code AMBPRO is going to reduce your amount payable to 2,294.15. And then for 3 months, normally the amount payable is 6,999. Application of exactly the same coupon code AMBPRO is going to reduce it to 5,949.15. And again, for 6 months, normally the amount payable would be, the usual rate is going to be 11,499. But then considering the offers that are currently happening, just the application of the coupon code AMBPRO will reduce it to 9,774.15. Okay, children, so go ahead, check out the details, go to vdnt.in/ytpro and choose whatever suits you. So if it's 6 months, for instance, it means that for the next 6 months, I think now it's the ideal time to subscribe to that, because we are in the month of September, and you are roughly like 6 months away from the end of your academic year. So think about it. You will have unlimited access to all of these features, and check out what is pocket friendly to you also, and then go ahead. Okay, so let us go ahead to understand the contents that I have for you today. Let's understand what is reproduction, what is fission, budding, fragmentation, regeneration, spore formation, and vegetative propagation. Yes, that does look like quite a lot, but it is not too much, I would say. All you have to know is understand the basics of what each of these terms means. Okay, so let's start with what reproduction is. It is the biological process by which organisms create young ones similar to themselves. And why do you think this even exists? Reproduction exists so that, I think I told you this when I started with life processes also, because reproduction is one process, one biological process by which species can continue on this planet. Right, and not just for the survival of one individual organism. If it's at the level of an individual organism, reproduction would not be as necessary as digestion, respiration, circulation, and excretion. Whereas reproduction is absolutely essential when you think of a species as a whole, right? So that is about it. Now, talking about variation, offsprings may have, not always, they may have totally new variations of their parents' characters. The characters that their parents have, children or offsprings may have totally new variations or slight variations from their parental characters also. And why is it important? Variations are essential for evolution. If you just think about where life began on this planet, if you have ever watched any video or read up any book about how life on Earth originated, you would perhaps have an idea that a lot of magical reactions happened in water, and it led to the formation of the first living cell. And that probably multiplied and became 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on. It kept on happening. But imagine if there was no variation in that first living cell that was formed, life still would have been only that same kind of cell that was first formed, right? But then today, that's not the case. Look around everywhere. Just look outside your window. You would see so many different trees, so many varieties of animals, so many different varieties of plants and trees. And we ourselves, look at the sky, so many varieties of birds, so many variations, what we call biodiversity. So many different species, millions of different species, which is known to man today, because we also need to consider the microorganisms, which are highly diverse and have a lot of variety amongst themselves. So all of this came about only because of variations. Okay, that is why variation is so significant. So significance of variation, I've just listed it out for you. It leads to evolution, it helps organisms adapt to environmental changes, and it results in new characteristics. Okay, so it can be one single bird, which you see here, but then you can see that they've got a lot of differences. You can see that they have got different shaped beaks, they've got a different color, and so on. Evolution and variation, if you get the chance to read up any book related to this, definitely please go ahead and have a look, or even some video, because it's absolutely interesting. Okay, and that'll also bring you more insights into why learning all this is important to us. Okay. Now, let us try and understand the types of reproduction: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So, asexual reproduction is the type where only one parent is involved. From one single parent, many daughter cells are formed, or one splits into two daughter cells, that becomes four, and so on. But then the idea is that in asexual reproduction, regardless of the number of daughter cells or the daughter progeny, the parents and offsprings would look exactly like replicas of each other. Whereas in sexual reproduction, as in the case of human beings, like you see the big fat Indian wedding, or even if not humans, consider any other sexually reproducing organism, including flowering plants and all other animals we see around, two parents are involved, both belonging to opposite sexes, right? So that is how asexual and sexual reproduction are forming the two broad types of reproduction. Let's try to understand them one by one, and in today's session I'm going to be talking about the different common types of asexual reproduction. Okay, the first one is what we call fission. I think from your lower grades you would be learning about this. You would know what fission is perhaps already. This is generally found in unicellular organisms such as amoeba, paramecium, leishmania, etc. Okay, mainly most commonly seen in protozoans, which belong to the kingdom Protista. They are unicellular eukaryotes. This is very commonly seen. But some bacteria also exhibit or reproduce by fission. Now, what happens is, the gist of it is this: the parent cell may divide into two daughter cells or many daughter cells. If it's going to be dividing into two daughter cells, as you see in this case, this is the case of amoeba, which you see here, wherein the parent cell goes through a series of steps to ultimately divide into two daughter cells. If this is happening and if one splits into two, we call it binary fission, because bi is two. Whereas if one single parent cell divides into many daughter cells at a time, like one parent cell splits up into so many, like it could be more than two itself, it could be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or even hundreds at a time, we call it multiple fission. Okay, so binary fission and multiple fission. Let's look at the steps of binary fission. The parent cell carries out nuclear division. So nucleus divides first, and then the cytoplasm divides, and that results in the formation of two daughter cells. So nuclear division first, followed by cytoplasmic division, which forms two new daughter cells, exactly looking like carbon copies of each other, and like how the original parent cell looked like. Now, about the types of binary fission. It can either be irregular binary fission, longitudinal binary fission, or transverse binary fission. Okay, irregular binary fission, as in the case of amoeba, because amoeba, as we know it, it is an irregularly shaped organism. So no definite shape, right? We can't even say it's round or whether it's elongated or nothing like that. It's got no definite shape. So that is why we call the type of binary fission in amoeba as irregular. Whereas in the case of more structured or organisms with better designed shapes, like in the case of euglena and paramecium, you can call it longitudinal. As you can see here, it is like vertically splitting into two, as you see here, right? The parent cell or the parent organism, it's growing this way, and the nucleus is trying to split up, and cytoplasm splits vertically, and it results in two new daughter cells. And likewise, in the case of paramecium, which looks like a slipper, so we also call it the slipper animalcule, this carries out what we call transverse binary fission, because longitudinal is this way, vertically, transverse is horizontally. Always have that idea in your mind. So transverse binary fission would mean that some kind of a small constriction is formed here, so that it is preparing itself to divide transversely or horizontally. And you can see that in the final step, it divides this way, horizontally, into two identical daughter cells. So once again, binary fission can either be irregular, longitudinal, or transverse, and think of the examples for each of them also. Now, about multiple fission. So this is usually seen in many organisms, especially the same unicellular organisms, especially when they are under unfavorable conditions. By unfavorable conditions, I mean it could be anything, like no proper environmental conditions, like temperature is not proper for them to reproduce or to survive. Maybe there's not enough moisture for them to survive, and so on. It could be anything. During unfavorable conditions, what they do is, amoeba, for example, one parent cell forms, look at that, if this is one parent cell, it forms what we call a cyst around itself, a very, very thick wall, which we call the cyst. And inside that, the parent nucleus, as you can see here, multiplies, carries out a lot of subsequent divisions, divides into multiple nuclei, and eventually the cyst wall breaks open and all the daughter nuclei get released. Look at the GIF once again. Yes, nuclei multiplying, cyst wall breaking, and they are all released. Have a look at it again. Nuclei multiplying, cyst wall breaking, all of them are released, and all of them individually grow into normal adult or normal organisms. Okay, this is about multiple fission. And now about the second type, which we call budding. So we've seen fission and its subtypes. Now coming to budding. So budding is where certain regenerative cells in an organism's body are used to form what we call a bud, and that bud develops into an adult organism. For example, in Hydra, as you can see here, in one part of the body, there would be certain cells which have the ability to keep regenerating. Okay, so those cells end up forming what we call a bud, and eventually that detaches from the parent body and grows into an adult organism. Hydra is a very good example of this from the animal kingdom. Yeast is also a good example of budding. And what kind of an organism is yeast? It is a fungus, belongs to the kingdom fungi. So let's look at how this happens in Hydra. There we go. The bud is initially formed. It keeps growing, resembles the parent, and detaches from the parent plant. After detaching here, like after full growth, it detaches and grows independently. Okay, into an adult organism. This is budding in Hydra, and this is what you see as budding in yeast, wherein it's pretty much microscopic because it's happening at the cellular level, because yeasts are microscopic organisms, and the cells are splitting up. You can see the buds which are getting formed, and they just split off from the parent organism and grow into new organisms. This is about budding. So fission, budding, and then fragmentation. What is fragmentation? Now listen carefully, children. As in the case of certain organisms like Spirogyra, fragmentation can be seen wherein once that organism has reached maturity or has attained maturation, complete maturation or maturity, they just end up breaking into smaller pieces. Okay, and each of those individual pieces, look, you can see here, they're just splitting into individual pieces, and each of those individual pieces are growing up and developing into an independent organism. Very, very commonly seen in the case of Spirogyra. Okay, so this is what fragmentation is, and we are coming to something very closely related to fragmentation, which we call regeneration. Now listen carefully, children, because many of you have a confusion between fragmentation and regeneration. Let's get it sorted now. In regeneration, what happens is when cut into pieces, when an organism is cut into pieces, in the case of some organisms, each of those cut fragments grow into an individual organism. Okay, examples are Hydra, Planaria, starfish, and so on. So you may wonder, what is the difference between fragmentation and regeneration, if that's the case? Because both of them, from tiny cut up pieces, they are developing into a complete individual organism. But let me bring in one important point for you here. Regeneration actually is not happening as a means of reproduction alone. The intention of regeneration is actually, the main intention of regeneration is actually something else. Look at this. More than being a mode of reproduction, regeneration is considered to be a mechanism by which some organisms can restore lost body parts. In the case of human beings, I think liver is one organ in the human body which can regenerate because of some kind of liver disease or something like a jaundice or something. Sometimes people can end up losing a lot of their liver organ. I mean, most of that organ just is lost. So even if just a little bit of the liver tissue is remaining, that organ, liver, can regenerate itself into the full organ. This is in the case of human beings. If you have seen in the case of lizards, some reptiles like lizards, they may like when they are frightened, they end up just escaping they end up just running around like very fast to escape from a dangerous situation. In that process, they may end up losing like the tip of their tail. So when that happens, sometimes you may see tailless lizards also. I don't know if you have noticed, but then have a look at them in case you are not scared of lizards. Okay, but the truth is that it's not a loss, because within a few days or weeks, the lost piece of the tail will grow back, which is an example for regeneration. Likewise, in the case of starfish also, which I will be showing you, this is what regeneration in Planaria is like. Because of some kind of accident, like accidentally, the organism is getting split up into different pieces. Even if that happens in these organisms like planaria, hydra, starfish, and all of them, each of those lost parts can grow back into a fully developed organism. Whereas the other examples I told you, like in the case of lizard's tail or in the case of the human liver, it's not like it can regenerate into the entire organism. A lizard's tail piece, if lost, that doesn't become a fully developed lizard as such. Okay, so the tail piece, what is lost, but then regeneration happens in the sense that the lost piece of the tail is grown back by the lizard. But then in certain lower organisms like some of these invertebrates like planaria, hydra, and starfish, in case because of some accident they do end up losing their body parts, get cut up by accident, each of those parts can grow up into a fully developed organism. Planaria is basically a flatworm. Okay, so you must have learnt this in your class 9 in the chapter Diversity in Living Organisms. This is about planaria. And then this is the example of starfish that I told you. By some accident, if a starfish ends up losing one of its arms, say for instance, you know how beautiful an organism starfish is, right? In case one of its arms is lost because of some reason or the other, that arm itself can grow back into a fully developed starfish. And the other starfish also, the main starfish body, it can also regenerate its lost arm. Okay, so this is an example of regeneration, wherein, as I told you, it's different from fragmentation in the sense that fragmentation happens with the sole purpose of reproduction. An organism attains maturity, immediately it breaks up into fragments. Each fragment grows up into an individual organism. Whereas in regeneration, most of these organisms are those which have other modes of reproduction to be able to reproduce. But then they carry out regeneration. They have the ability to carry out regeneration in case of an emergency. Okay? Yes. So this is how it happens in hydra. Also, we have seen already that hydra carries out budding as one of its main methods of reproduction. In case it gets amputated or cut up, look at that. It's regenerating itself. The upper part and the lower part are developing into two independent organisms. There we go. Now coming to the next type of asexual reproduction, which is spore formation. Now children, before you lose track, let me recall whatever we have done until now. We have spoken about fission, budding, fragmentation, and regeneration. Okay, now we are talking about the fifth type of asexual reproduction, which is spore formation. The spores are structures which can eventually develop into new organisms. For example, this is seen in certain fungi and some plants also. Look at that. Spores are getting released. Look at that. And those released spores are growing up into independent adult organisms. So I think the best example for that is Rhizopus, which we commonly call bread mold. All of you know what bread mold is, right? At least everyone must have eaten bread at least at some point or the other. So if you leave bread outside at room temperature for a very long time, probably like 3 days, 4 days or something, especially if it's a place where there is a lot of moisture, you would see that within a couple of days or 3 days or 4 days, it develops certain grayish or bluish patches over the bread. Definitely it's not healthy to eat that bread anymore, because what you see is a fungus which has developed on it, and that is what we call bread mold, scientifically called Rhizopus. Okay, and we see only that top spot which is there on the slices of bread, but then within it, microscopically, if you examine it, it's got a lot of structure underneath, just like a plant. Okay, Rhizopus, this is what it looks like. It has a branched structure like this, just like plants have. This is what we call the rhizoid, which forms something like its root structure. And then we have what is called the stolon. All of this is just there for you to get a picture of it in your imagination. And then you can see that there is a structure called the sporangium, in which the spores are formed, and that breaks open to release the spores. So what happens then? When the spores are released, each of those spores gets deposited on these bread slices, and each of those spores also have the ability to grow into new Rhizopus bodies, new adult organisms. And this is how multiplication of such viruses, or in the case of certain plants, This is how reproduction happens, by spore formation, rhizopus. Remember that example, children, very important from an exam perspective also. Then we come to what we call vegetative propagation, wherein this is the mode of reproduction in plants by which vegetative plant parts. What are vegetative plant parts? They are those plant parts which include root, stem, leaves, etc. Basically, the otherwise the normal parts of the plant which would normally reproduce, we are not talking about them. We are talking about the vegetative plant parts, which are root, stem, leaves, and so on. They end up developing into new plants under appropriate conditions. So why are we talking about this? Especially for us human beings, vegetative propagation is one preferred method for us to develop our own gardens. In case you are a very passionate gardener, vegetative propagation would be, techniques under vegetative propagation would be highly preferred by you. Okay, so there are a lot of methods. There are natural methods of vegetative propagation and also artificial methods. Now, grafting is one method of artificial vegetative propagation, wherein two or more desirable plants are used. So, for example, if I have now, this doesn't work for all plants. Remember that there are certain rules for this. Like in the case of apple, peach, etc., this would work. In case there are two different plant bodies on which you have, on one of them, there are certain characters that you like. There is another plant body whose certain characters also you like. So, what do you want to do? You want to try an experiment by crossing between them and trying to grow them into one single plant, so that that one single plant will have all of those preferred characters. Vegetative propagation by grafting can help in this. So what you do is you choose the bottom of one of those plants. I told you choose two plants. Let's call them plant 1 and plant 2. So plant 1, say for instance, you use it for its root system, its dormant root stock. We call it the stock. Okay, plant 1 is used as the base or the root stock for grafting. You just cut out this part, and then what do? You take plant 2, which is the yellow one that you see here, and what you do is you make an incision or a small cut in the stalk, and you insert the part of plant 2 which we call scion. Okay, the scion is inserted in the stalk. Scion would cut and insert it into the stalk, and they are wrapped. This junction, the graft junction, is basically wrapped so that in the next season buds can shoot. Like if this is done properly and if this is done on the right kinds of plants, they can eventually grow together as one individual plant. Okay, this is what is done in grafting, which is a method of vegetative propagation. Layering is also another method of vegetative propagation, wherein a portion of an above ground stem grows roots while it is still attached to the parent plant, and then it detaches as an independent plant. So what do? In the case of climbing roses, rhododendron and honeysuckle and plants like those, what we do is, this is a fully grown plant, as you can see here. One of its stems is bent down. As you can see, we manually bend it down deep into the soil, and what we do is we place some kind of a weight or something over that part on the soil, so that this doesn't spring back up above the soil. Within a few days or weeks, this part, while it is still attached to the main parent plant, this part which we planted below the soil would develop its own root system, and it would shoot up this way, and eventually it would detach and grow into an independent plant. This is what we call layering. So we've seen grafting and we've seen layering. Okay, and cutting, I think most Indians would be familiar with this, because plants like a rose, etc., can be grown easily by cutting. If you have parents who are passionate gardeners, you might have observed, I'm not sure, but at least I have seen my mom do that sometimes when I was a child, that if there are friends, family friends or relatives places that we visit, and they may have some beautiful garden with some kind of a very beautiful rose plant or something like that, we might end up sharing it. We might want to grow that plant in our garden also. Same way, when people visit us, they may also ask us, okay, what kind of a plant is this? Can I take like one piece of it, one stem of it, so that I can also grow it in my garden? So this is done easily by the method which we call cutting. Okay, so rose is one very good example of this, wherein a piece of the stem or root is placed in moist soil, and if done rightly, the piece ends up developing roots and grows into an individual, fully developed plant. Okay. So these are the major methods of artificial vegetative propagation, and the advantages of vegetative propagation are listed out here. Such plants can bear flowers and fruits much earlier than those plants raised by seeds. One very important advantage. Okay, then which means it's like saving a lot of time for gardeners. Then, even plants that cannot produce seeds, such as banana, orange, rose, jasmine, etc., can be propagated through vegetative propagation. Then, all daughter plants are genetically so similar to the parent plant that they exhibit all the parental characteristics. This is the third advantage. Okay, so for people who are very interested in gardening, definitely this would be very useful. Okay, children, so let us quickly have a very quick quiz to see how much of this we have understood. We've spoken about quite a number of asexual reproduction techniques, the names of which I will list out at the end after the quiz. So hold on, but let's understand this. Information of inheritance is carried from one generation to the next in the form of carbohydrates, lipids, fats, or DNA. And your time ends in 3, 2, 1 and go. Okay, in the form of DNA, information of inheritance is carried from one generation to the next in the form of DNA, segments of which we call genes. Okay, next one. Dash allows organisms to survive in different niche or different kinds of environments. Is it inheritance? Is it variation? Is it cloning? Or none of these? Okay, and your time is up. The answer is variation. Okay, useful variations, as long as they are very useful. Why we would call them useful could be because those remember the picture which I showed you with the same kind of bird, the same species of birds with variations such that its beak shape is different from that of each others. Although they may belong to the same species, their structures, a lot of their structures may be differently shaped. Why so? Why is it even a useful variation? Because the places in which they survive probably have different kinds of food available. So depending upon that, if the bird has its beak adapted to that kind of food, definitely it's not going to die of starvation, right? Okay, that is why we say variations can allow organisms to survive in different niche. Okay, now multiple fission is observed in animals which are dash under stress, optimum temperature, optimum pressure, optimum nutrition. This is very easy. I'm sure all of you are going to get this right. And your time is up. The answer is under stress. I told you, amoeba and quite a number of unicellular organisms that way, when they are under stress, they don't stop the process of reproduction. Rather, they form a cyst around them. Nucleus, parent nucleus splits up into many daughter nuclei. Eventually, when favorable conditions return, the cyst breaks open and so many daughter nuclei are released. So many daughter organisms are released. Now, splitting of protozoa into two equal halves is termed as which of these? Multiple fission, binary fission, fusion, or budding? And your time is up. Definitely you know the answer to this. It is binary fission. Splitting of protozoa, which is an example for splitting of the parent organism into two similar or equal halves. Now, if Spirogyra breaks into multiple pieces, each piece will dash. Will it lose mitochondria? Will it lose Golgi apparatus? Will it grow into a new organism, or will it just wither and die off? Yes, Spirogyra. And your time is up. The answer is each piece will grow into new organisms. Okay? And now, process of regeneration is seen in which of these? Fishes, birds, Euglena, planaria. Regeneration. I told you the example. I remember very well mentioning this as an example. And your time is up. The answer is planaria, the flatworm I was talking about. Now, Rhizopus multiplies by fragmentation, spore formation, budding, binary fission. What is Rhizopus in the first place? Think about that. It's a botanical name, but what kind of an organism is it? So how does it multiply? And your time is up. The answer is spore formation. Remember, bread mold is what I was talking about. And there we go. Great job, all of you who have got all the answers correctly. Rest of you, in case there is any confusion, please do not hesitate to get it corrected either by watching the replay or asking me the doubts. Remember, like in life processes, we will be having a doubts and mentee session at the end of the chapter. So in case you have any questions, please post it in the comment section below. As long as they are genuine doubts, we will be taking them up and answering them in the Doubts Plus Mentee session. So let us quickly recap what we have learned today. We've seen what is reproduction. We've seen the different methods of asexual reproduction, right? Which are methods wherein only one parent organism is involved. Fission, budding, fragmentation, regeneration, spore formation, vegetative propagation. In fission itself, we have seen binary fission and multiple fission. And in binary, we have seen irregular binary fission, longitudinal binary fission, and also transverse binary fission. Remember the examples for all of these. You just need to understand the meaning of the terms irregular, longitudinal, and transverse, and then automatically the example will come to your mind. Okay. Longitudinal is this way. Think of the latitudes and longitudes. If you've learned it in geography, you would know. Longitudes are this way, vertical. Transverse is horizontally. Okay. And then we have budding, which we've seen, hydra as an example. Fragmentation, wherein spirogyra was an example. Regeneration, wherein we said it's similar to fragmentation, but the difference is that regeneration typically occurs in order to recover an organism from a lost body part. Okay, in times of emergencies. And then spore formation, as in the case of Rhizopus, which is bread mold, and many other fungi and plants. And then vegetative propagation, we have seen, I think we've spoken about grafting, we've spoken about layering, and we've spoken about cutting. Mainly we've spoken about these three. So I think with that, we are good to go ahead and end this session. But then before we leave, here is your homework question. Name two animals which perform multiple fission. Two animals. I want two examples of animals which perform, or two organisms which perform multiple fission. Okay, let's make it organisms. Let's not keep it animals. So children who have already answered, don't get confused. I am correcting this to organisms. Okay, name two organisms which perform multiple fission. And there we go. Let's see who's giving me the answer first. And in the meantime, do remember to visit bdnt.in/ytpro children, because we've got a lot of pocket-friendly, amazingly designed courses exclusively for you. So boost your preparation. Now is the time. You are a few months away from your board exam and things will fall into place. But then to avail the best offers, the best discounts, use the coupon code AMBPRO. And that brings us to the end of today's session, children. If you have enjoyed the session, please do remember to hit the like button right now before you leave. Please remember to share it with all your CBSE 10 friends, or even any other board or any other grade, because I'm sure whoever has this chapter or is trying to prepare for some competitive exam will find this useful. Basics are always very useful. And then, in case you've not subscribed to our channel, Vedantu 9th and 10th English, please do remember to hit the subscribe button right now and the bell icon right next to it, so that you don't miss out on any of our notifications, because every single day, for all your major subjects, not just bio, you have physics, chemistry, math, English, social studies. We have all our passionate teachers coming here to give you amazing content and make your learning simple and fun. Okay, children, so until we meet again, take care, stay happy and stay safe. This is Ambika signing off. Bye-bye.